Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Secure AF podcast. My name is Todd. I'm our Director of Communications and Technical Writer, and joining me today is Jonathan Kimmett.
Hello.
Today we're going to approach the topic of cybersecurity from a little bit different perspective, and the title of this episode is Losing the Cyberwar Because of Marketing. So Jonathan, I'm going to have you jump in. Tell us a little bit about what that means and what you mean by marketing and sort of framing the conversation.
We, in the industry, over the last couple of years, we've really been taking a lot of hits. Organizations have been getting hit with breaches and ransomware, and services have been going down because of that. And when you say cybersecurity, that's really what people think about nowadays. You take a random person out on the internet, out in the world, and just say, hey, when I say cybersecurity, what do you think about? And they go, well, ransomware or spam or, I have to change my password every 90 days or whatever. So it's because of that, people are starting to, it seems like, have this negative connotation of cybersecurity because they're only associating it with bad things.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I think once you start down that spiral, you don't ever come back from it. When we look at the good things that cybersecurity does and IT security, the community, the things that we do as a community, and how we present it versus how the hackers do it on their side, they are much more successful. The attackers and the hackers are much more successful than we are from a marketing point of view. So I had a marketing class back in college. I was a business major in college. And one of the requirements is you had to take this marketing class. And I found it fascinating because the idea of the marketing was trying to get someone to feel something because of the marketing, whatever you're providing, whether it's audio, on a radio, whether it's TV, whether it's a picture or a billboard, a color, or whatever. The whole idea, and there's a lot of science that goes into this. Yeah. And I remember there was one story, it was a training thing, but it was this ad, and it was on, I believe it was a magazine or a newspaper ad, I don't remember which, but it was paper advertising.
So outdated now.
Very outdated now, yes. But it was funny because the professor who I was very fortunate because the professor that I had was actually an adjunct professor. He was running an ad company. Okay. So he was coming in at night and teaching. I liked taking night classes back then. And he was showing all this stuff. And the way it wasn't one of his ads. It was something he pulled out of, again, a magazine or something. But he says, let's watch this, let's look at this. And the looking of that ad, it drew your eyes up and around by the way the shapes were. And even though it was a static ad on a sheet of paper, there was movement, and there was movement how it works. And he says, you're trying to get people to feel something on this ad. If they feel something, they will buy something or they will do something or whatever it is. And that stuck with me, Now, we do the same thing, such as social engineering attacks or a variety of other things where we're trying to get someone to believe something or to do something or to give us something in the attack. And so that, all those lessons from years ago has stuck with me in what we do. But now there's this other side that I see it, and I've talked to people about it, and it's kind of confusing to them because they're like, well, I never thought of that before. But it's truly, how do we market ourselves in cybersecurity? Now, from a pure CISO point of view, you have to market yourselves to leadership. Yeah. You have to market yourself to the organization. We have to market ourselves to the employees. We have to do these things to be successful. But when you take that one step out and start looking at the marketing in the world, that's where I feel like it starts falling apart. I get a lot of people who come to me and say, I want to be a CISO. And I'm like, why? And it is nothing against a CISO, but when you look at going out and doing searches on CISOs out on the internet, we look at what happened with the SolarWinds CISO is getting criminal charges and stuff from the SEC. You've got United Healthcare data breach with the CISO there. That's there was some sort of charge or fine or something saying that person wasn't qualified to do the job. I mean, you go look at a lot of news stories, and CISOs are getting hit. Plus the fact these organizations are getting hit with ransomware, they're getting hit with breaches. So I kind of look at it as like, well, why would you want to be a CISO? Now, don't get me wrong, I love being a CISO. I love my job, and I love helping people, and that's why I do it. And we are constantly changing that viewpoint. But all you ever hear are bad things. That's all you're ever going to think about. And that's why I think we need to change the marketing. That's why I think we're losing this cyber war, is because we're not bringing in good people. We're not getting people to apply. We're not bringing them into the industry because all they ever see is bad things.
Right.
And I think that that's a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting that it feels like the narrative is only failure.
Yes.
As opposed to, from the hacker side, only success. Right.
Oh, yeah.
The number of attacks that fail daily is legion, but you don't hear about those because you don't know.
Yes.
And the fact of how much good defense goes on every day, how many breaches are prevented.
Right.
Again, part of that is that's not the narrative, but part of it's you don't know. It's sort of this hidden thing of the success stories are all under the surface. Or you talked about just how you're positioning the marketing to several different audiences and saying, well, what does the leadership need? And one of the things that I think about for the employees is it probably feels like cybersecurity is being afraid of screwing something up. Right? Oh man, I clicked the phishing link. Oh man, it just feels like the cybersecurity people are only after showing where you messed up.
Well, and I think you said it very clearly just a second ago. Every time the hacker fails, we never hear about it. But when they succeed, we hear about it. So when they ransomware an organization, it's public knowledge. It's on the news. Everyone gets emails, whatever. It's the complete opposite for IT security people, security professionals. Every time they succeed, you never hear about it. But the moment they fail, the moment that hacker succeeds, then man, they're under the gun. Now, don't get me wrong. I think it can be justified.
Right.
We want people to know that there's problems, and we have to tell people. But I also think it's important to get out there and say what we were successful on. Mm-hmm. There's this really interesting thing that I found when I got into security years ago. When you go to IT conferences, first of all, for whatever reason, IT people don't like going to conferences. They truly don't. They don't go to conferences. They don't ask questions. They don't talk to people. If they do, it's very rarely or as a very specific person. But as a general rule, they don't go out and talk. And I found this when I was running the help desk many, many, many years ago. I didn't have colleagues in the community that I could go and reach out and ask questions on. But when I moved to cybersecurity, when I started doing it full time, and I made myself go to conferences and go to people were talking, we were engaging, we were discussing with one another what was successful for you, what was successful for me, what failed for you, what failed for me. We talked. It was very different, and I think that that's really important because if you don't talk, if you don't engage, you can't get ideas. You get in this little bubble and you don't know how to get out of it. You don't know. You try to come up with your own solutions to problems that somebody else figured out 6 months ago, 10 months ago, 2 years ago, whatever. So because of that, people, there is this mindset you don't talk about things.
Right.
Now, that goes right into what we're seeing in problems. Organizations as a whole don't like talking about their problems. That's why we have social constructs or compliances saying you have to tell people.
Right.
Now, I understand why they don't want to tell people. It's reasonable because they're going to take a hit in terms of reputation. They might get in trouble. There might be charges. There might be all kinds of stuff. But I think that because they're not saying things, then that's hurting the overall community and the overall environment. If we had more people talking about the successes about what they were able to defend against and how they did it, we start building that community up. Because while there is a business side and business competition, or competition for the business side, all security professionals are on the same side, pretty much. I mean, you should all be defending your people, defending your organizations, defending everything you do. So we should all be on that same side of security, on that community side. So discussing with each other, talking with one another. And I still love going to conferences. Number one, I love speaking and helping people and growing, and I love doing things like this. But I also love going there because when I get to go, I can sit and talk for hours with people in the hallway conversations, and people I know or even people I don't know. And we can talk about problems, what was successful, what wasn't, what worked, what didn't. And that really is important. I wish they started doing that in a broader sense in the organizations, because if you don't know what works, you don't know what the attacks are coming in, there is no way you're going to defend against them.
I wonder if too part of both the marketing of IT, and then maybe this plays into IT professionals not wanting to go to conferences, is even hearing people say, "Oh, I just do this," right? I'm just a network admin. I just do this, as opposed to it can sound, even the way that they talk about it, kind of boring, very factual, as opposed to cybersecurity. I mean, all the time I get people find out I work for a cybersecurity industry. Oh, tell me about that. I'm guessing that doesn't happen if I just said, "Oh, I'm in IT." You don't get the same sort of reaction. And then I wonder if that, part of not telling a success story is the success story. If you don't tell it right, doesn't sound like a success story. So, I think about when our engineers go on a pen test and they find, everything's locked down hard. One, on the one hand, you're an ethical hacker. You're like, "Oh man, I really wanted to get in." On the other hand, you're like, "This is really good."
Yeah.
But if you said what made that network and that environment locked down, it's all the stuff that would just sound very mundane and boring.
Yeah.
You had good password policy. You had good network segmentation. And so how do we retell the story and help IT people feel empowered to know that that's the story? Like, you just doing these boring things is cybersecurity.
Yeah.
So that when somebody says, "What do?" You say, "Well, what I do is I'm pretty integral in protecting the organization, protecting the people."
Yep.
As opposed to, "Well, what I do is I sit there and make sure the network is working."
Well, and that is a big thing, because I help a lot of people who are coming out of organizations from an IT point of view get into IT security. Mm-hmm. And they'll come to me and they'll say, "I don't have any experience in security." And I'll ask them questions like, what do you do in your job? "Oh, well, I'm help desk." Okay. Well, what do you actually do? "Well, I help people change their passwords. I might help people do Windows updates. I might install software." It's like, all of that is security. Mm-hmm. Every piece of that goes in our reports.
Right.
When we do a pen test report, you're not doing updates. You're not changing your password. So, I mean, what they're doing is security. In fact, I would say nowadays, probably 90% of the things that we deal with is actually IT stuff. Yep. If you were doing those things better in the organization, then the security is kind of built in.
Right. I mean, it's like patching. Okay, that could seem very boring. "Oh man, we're pushing updates." Yeah, but but many of the exploits out there are, this wasn't patched. You find an unpatched server, you find an unpatched host. So it's like that thing that might seem boring is so critical and is a part of the story. Like, hey, we're pushing updates. You know what, guys? This is absolutely crucial. This is what you're doing is integral to making sure that our network's secure.
Well, and my fear is that organizations are not doing those things. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that in the pen tests and audits and stuff. So they're not doing those things for a variety of reasons. And therefore they are insecure. They are vulnerable to threats, and they're getting hit.
Right.
If we spun that a little bit and say, "Hey, this is what good is. Mm-hmm. You should be doing good." And honestly, from an IT perspective, how powerful would it be to say, "Hey, our competitors down the road who are making a lot more money than us are doing all these good things, and they're not getting hit with these threats." Now, if you can't convince somebody to do good security because it's the right thing to do, that's one of those things. You have to market yourself correctly to the business. Then you have to figure out a way to get that done. So if, as a leader, a security leader, it doesn't matter what your position is. You could be a SOC analyst. You could be a CISO. You could be whatever it is. If you are a security professional, it is your job to convince your business to do good things in security. Now, that means either doing it because you are protecting the organization, protecting the people at the organization, or if you need to, you make the case that if you were doing these better things, you would have better market value. Mm-hmm. Because the organization down the street that didn't get hit with the most recent breach, and they were down for 5 days, or they weren't down for 5 days because of a ransomware, they made more money.
Right.
That could be a very easy way to convince the business, to market to the business for doing good protocols. But the problem is no one's talking to one another.
Right.
From that IT perspective. They might from a security perspective, but sometimes they get in trouble for that. So they tend not to. So IT doesn't talk to one another. They don't deploy good things. All the time I will go in. Are you doing this? No, we're not doing that. Why not? Well, because the CEO doesn't want that.
Right.
Okay, have you talked to the CEO? Well, no, I've never talked to him. Then how does the CEO know that that is a bad thing to do?
Right.
Well, they don't talk to us. I go talk to him. Go knock on the door.
Right.
What's the worst that could happen? You get fired? Okay. No offense. Get fired. Go to a better company. I mean, I'm not saying to do that. I don't want anybody to get fired. But if you're in an environment where people won't listen to you as a security professional or even IT professional, that may not be a good environment. And maybe that is time to move on to go help someone else do better.
Yeah, and I wonder if part of it's that IT, we run into this when we do a pen test debrief, right? That sometimes IT professionals are worried to see where things aren't working or where there are vulnerabilities because they think this is going to come back on me. Instead of part of what we sometimes will say is actually what we want the report to do is for it to be essentially leverage for you to be able to say, we should be doing these things, or I need more money because we can't. I remember being in a debrief with it was a college.
Yeah.
And hideously understaffed, hideously under-equipped. And they had this large report, and they said, "Man, we can't do all of this." And we're very clear engineers saying, "I know, empathizing with them. This was not you're doing something wrong, but hey, you're in a bad position. How can we actually in the report market it so that you can take it and they can clearly see the impact, they can see the danger. How can we as a company actually help you as an IT security professional get the messaging clear to because the report by itself doesn't mean a whole lot to the CEO or something. But how can we write an executive summary? How can we word something different so that you can take that and say, hey, we really need this, and that's not because I'm doing something or my team's doing something wrong. We literally don't have the bandwidth. We cannot do this. But if you want it to happen, you got to send some money and people our way.
Well, first of all, it's easier to write a pen test report. It's easier to present a pen test report than it is to present an incident response report.
Right.
So do the pen test, figure it out, present that, whatever you have to do. Because if you have to present an incident response report later because you're down for 10 days, that's a big issue. Again, it's marketing.
Right.
One of the things that you're talking about pen tests, about organizations who they're kind of iffy on the pen tests. They don't really want to know what their problems are, and we've talked about this in other podcasts, probably several times. But it drives me nuts when I walk into an organization and I'm helping with the on call, that first initial kickoff call, and they say, okay, we only want you to check this. Okay, and that's completely fair from a budgetary point of view, how much money you have and how much time and whatever. But we had this one instance where we were doing a pen test, and one of the parts of the pen test is to see if we could jump out of a network.
Right.
So we were on this network. We were trying to get out. Now, that network was in scope, but we call it a leak test, but it's how do you get out of that network to go to someone else? Well, if to get out, you got to try to find a way out, and we found one. And so we found these sections of machines that were vulnerable, pretty significantly vulnerable, actually. And so we let them know. I was like, hey, we were able to jump out, and here's what we found. And they go, well, that wasn't under scope. Well, we understand, but I mean, to jump out of a network, you have to jump into something.
Right.
And we found these other ones, and this is how we did it, and whatever. Well, we can't have that in a report. That wasn't under scope. But it was, because it was a leak test. They were so afraid. Number one, they wanted that pen test report to say that they were doing good work.
Right.
And they were. But they had this other section that wasn't. They were trying to limit us to the pen test in the good section, and that way the bad section wouldn't show up. And it's like, no, we can't do that. If we found a problem, we have to report it. There's a liability on us.
Yeah.
And it really upset them. I mean, it really, there was some choice words presented back to me by one of the individuals about it. And it's like, that's not the way this works. I mean, we're just trying to show you a liability for the organization, and we have to report that in the report so you can make appropriate decisions around that. But probably from their point of view, they want to present to their leadership that they're doing a good job, and finding anything that might be taken advantage of can maybe cost them their job or cost them funding, whatever. But my job as a CISO, before I came to Alias, I was a CISO, and my job was to take the things from a pen test or a red team exercise or whatever and go, okay, here is a problem. Here is a solution. Here are the resources I need, and take that to leadership. Leadership doesn't want to hear about problems. Understood, 100%. Right. My job is to market it correctly to them based on what they want to know. Number one, yes, we found problems. I have a solution, and here's some alternatives of that solution depending on how much resources I'm going to get. And I was very fortunate. I had great support from our board and leadership. So every time I went, they were supportive 100%. They would say, absolutely. If I needed funds, they'd give me funds. If I needed resources, I'd get resources. But I wanted to market to them correctly. And there was a lot of pieces of that. We can go down rabbit holes on how you do that to board members. And maybe that's a podcast that we do. But I mean, everything from how you dress to how you speak, the reports that you write, the follow-ups, all that stuff, all of that is marketing. It's social engineering, but it's marketing to that. You have to market yourself as that expert, and to show them that you know what you're talking about, and to get their trust and their respect so they can turn around and give that right back to you. But it's very important. It's very important from the organizational point of view. It's very important from the IT point of view. It's very important from the security point of view. If you're not doing those things, you're kind of putting yourselves at a disadvantage.
So I'm interested now. I mean, we've sort of talked generally, but let's talk a little bit about what the distinction is that you've seen in the way that IT, cybersecurity, but especially IT, gets sort of marketed, the stories that are out there, as opposed to the hackers, and even how maybe hacker positions get advertised, what that looks like. Because that's really fascinating that we don't think about hackers having an industry and doing marketing to attract good talent in the same way that the good guys, like, how do I attract and retain good talent? The hackers are actually thinking the same thing. So what is the distinction, as you've looked into this, that you see in those dynamics? Because I'm really curious.
So this is just a fascinating, side conversation. Here's what I tell people to do. Go out onto the internet and search CISO for hire, or I need a CISO, or whatever, And you're going to find a whole bunch of websites that say how to recruit CISOs, how to do a job posting. You might find a lot of jobs out there for CISOs, but it's really hard to find a CISO. I went and did the exact same search on the darknet for hire a hacker or find a hacker. And all these websites popped up, say, hire a hacker this much. We do this for this much. It was so much easier to hire a hacker than it was to hire a security professional. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, and I understand that. But when I did this live in a presentation one day.
Oh my gosh.
And the audience was completely dumbfounded. It's like, exactly. Mm-hmm. The attackers know how to market themselves and how to get people to come in. And honestly, I can see where it's more fun for them.
Yeah.
I mean, take an IT specialist. So this is just an IT person who works somewhere. They're kind of tinkering. They've done some training classes. They've gone to some conferences. They've learned a little bit. They know how to Nmap. They do some basics. They know Metasploit. Like, I can make some extra money hacking on the side, which we have proof this happens, by the way. Hacking on the side for this hacking company. So the hackers goes like, hey, come and join us for X amount of money and learn how to do these exploits. They will teach them how to do them. They will give them tool sets. Here's the train. In fact, we had this incident not too long ago with this organization, and it was very odd. When we were doing the incident response, we kept finding these things. You're searching through logs, searching through machines, whatever. We were finding these things. It looked like there was we believe there was 3 different attackers doing things on this network. One seemed to be they got in. They got root access. The second one, different code, different processes, seemed to know what they were doing. And then there was a third one that really didn't know what they were doing. So now, as a CISO, I'm trying to put this in the report and trying to put a story around this, and I'm thinking, I wonder if this was a training session. Somebody got access. They sold access to another hacker group, another threat actor. They got in to verify they could get in and do what and then they handed it over to someone else to learn from it, a trainee. Now, I don't have any proof of this. We saw the logs and we saw the scripts and stuff that they were writing, and the first attack was really good. The second one was pretty good. The third one was like, kind of. But then you go out on the darknet and they say, we'll train you. We'll train you with all the tools. And then you get X amount or get paid or whatever. So it's really simple. Honestly, it feels like a security professional or IT professional can go out and get on the darknet and have a job same day, doing the things they like to do.
As opposed to maybe barriers to getting into IT or into IT security or into cybersecurity.
Yes. Do that with IT security. I've got CISO friends of mine that, for a variety of things, they don't have jobs right now, and they have applied. I had one friend who applied to over 3,000 jobs. I'll say this again. He applied to over 3,000 jobs. He is experienced. He's got years of experience. He's certified. But it's really hard to get through these applicant tracking systems. It's really hard to find a job that's not fake. Going through I'm not going to give any names out, but going through those very common websites people go to looking for jobs, it's really hard to get through that stuff. And he was without a job for months. And it's like, he is a qualified, experienced individual trying to get in and help an organization, and he couldn't find a job. That's crazy.
Then all we hear on the other side is the skill gap. We can't find good people. We can't hire good people. But then you have good people, qualified people who can't find. So there's this mismatch of there might be a good talent pool. There's a deficit in the number of people that they can find, but it's maybe not because of the skill gap. It may not be because of the people.
I agree 100%. I think we have a hiring problem. It is not the hiring problem that everyone thinks it is. It's a hiring problem because it's a hiring process problem. So that's a whole other one. I've got a friend who's in HR, and her and I talk a lot about a variety of things. But that's one of those things is, from her perspective, I believe, it's really hard to find people. Absolutely. On the other side, it's really hard for security professionals to find jobs.
Yeah.
there's a process problem there. There's not a matchup. But let's go back to the whole marketing thing. It's easier to find a hacker. It's easier to find a hacking job than it is to find a CISO. And when I say that, when I demonstrate it, and I pull it up, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're right." That's a problem. Why? And it's a significant problem, and I feel like there is an easy fix for it, but I don't know. That one's a hard one. You can see it though. Here's what you do. Go on the internet and say hire a CISO and see what you find. Go onto the darknet, go on to Tor and go hire a hacker. Yeah, you have to use the right, the search, everything. But just do that. You will see a significant difference. You will find people on the darknet who's like, yep, hire me. I'm a hacker. And here's what they do, and here's the things that they hack, and this is how much it's going to cost. And some of them give guarantees. This was fascinating to me when I started finding. We guarantee we'll get in.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between how hackers market themselves and how CISOs market themselves. And we have to change that. We have to change that.
It sounds like an ambulance chasing lawyer, right? You don't pay unless we win. It's like the hacker. Yeah. Well, you're not going to pay unless we actually get access. That's fascinating.
Now, I don't know how ethical these hackers are on the dark net. I know some of them are actually, from a very specific ethical point of view, are very ethical. I mean, they're good at their job and they want to provide that service out to them. Right.
And they may actually be the ones who, because that's part of negotiating with the ransomware group is, we'll give you, we'll give you the data back.
Yeah.
Maybe not. But there are some of them, and our guys have worked with some of them. They're like, man, one of our guys says some of those hacker groups have better customer support than most companies.
Yeah.
Like they're on there, they'll provide it, they're responsive, and they do what they say.
Yeah.
Which is so strange to think about.
Now, there's a lot that don't do that,
right.
though. Right. I mean, for every good ethical hacker, and we're using the term ethical hackers a little differently than the certified ethical hacker that we might talk about a little bit later. But those hackers that have a bit more ethics in terms of providing support to those organizations, it's a business to them.
Yeah.
If they don't provide good service, they're not going to get the ransom. There's a trade-off there.
Yeah. Well, let's talk maybe some specifics of what do you think? What are frameworks that we should think about adopting if we want to change the marketing of security? What are how do we change the language we use? How do we change the frameworks? How do we change how we publish things, where we publish things, where we communicate things?
Well, words matter. Which words you use. There's this, again, many years ago from the business side, there is this whole idea of spinning a story. Mm-hmm. You spin a story to meet your requirements. And that means using the right words and using that. So let me give you an example. Here's a good example. We were victims of ransomware and they took all of our systems down. Mm-hmm. Very common.
Yeah.
You hear that all the time. Versus we had an advanced threat actor who attacked us and was successful. Mm-hmm. Those two things mean the same thing, but there's different emphasis.
Well, the word victim, I don't want to give my business to somebody who's a victim.
Absolutely.
That sounds like there's no power,
Absolutely.
There's no agency, there's no authority. They were totally helpless. There was nothing they could have done.
Yep.
Well, okay, that doesn't build a lot of confidence, as opposed to there was an advanced threat actor. Oh, okay, this wasn't their problem.
Yeah.
There was somebody who was determined, who was equipped, who put forth a lot of effort. Oh, okay, maybe it doesn't feel... The first feels like all of our security controls failed and maybe weren't there. The second feels like we had security controls. They were in place. They were insufficient. And that may not be on us. That may be because a 0-day came out. That could be because of certain things.
Lots of reasons.
Oh, okay. that actually builds confidence in the company and the
Yeah.
security team.
Yeah. Now, I mean, you still have to spin it from the point of view of what you're going to do to
Yeah.
fix it and improve and whatever. But that thing that you say is really important, and what do people do? The other side of it is, here's one of them. So if you go out and do a quick search on cybersecurity successes, you're going to find a few things out there. I did this, again, I did this live, and I found an organization that was telling me about their successes. And they had this big, long write-up on it. It was a great write-up, and I was reading through it, and it was interesting. But then I did a search, and I found where they had been hacked and had a data breach within months of that article coming out. So, that marketing there was a disconnect there. Great success, then we got hacked. And you're right, sometimes it's not their fault. It's a 0-day or an insider threat or whatever. But you got to be careful on that. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things I would like to see is more successes from organizations saying, we are doing this, and here is our success in defending attacks. There is an argument that has been living in IT for 30 years. Now, I've been in almost 30 years. And it is the admin rights debate. Should users have admin rights? Some organizations absolutely will not allow it. Some organizations say, well, we can't get rid of it. I don't get into that fight anymore. It's a no-win situation. However, let's look at this from a marketing point of view. If an organization came out and says, hey, everybody, we do not allow admin rights on our users. We require multi-factor authentication on all of our admin accounts, root level accounts, global admins, domain admins. And they say this. And then I go to their competitor and I was like, do you guys require that? Oh, no, we don't do that. Who do you think I'm going with?
Right.
I'm going with the more secure. Now, are they 100% secure? Maybe not. I don't know. But I know that they're doing that well. And that would lead me to believe, hopefully, if I saw that at a marketing point of view, I'd go, if they're doing that, they might be doing other stuff well. If this other company is not doing that, I don't want to work with them because they're dangerous. Mm-hmm. So there is that marketing thing there of how do you provide this. So the other side of it is, I want to know. I mean, when I go into organizations, in a personal, I'll ask questions. And if they don't give me the right answers, I don't do business with them. And granted, the person that I'm usually talking with, they probably don't know, but I ask them to go find out. And they're like, why is this person asking this?
Right.
I had this one situation where I went in. This is right after I got PCI compliant years and years ago, or PCI certified. PCI was on the brain. I knew the processes. I had done my tests. I felt really good. I mean, I knew PCI stuff. And I went into this organization, or I went into this retail outlet, and I was buying something small. And I was going to pay with a credit card. And she goes, well, our credit card readers are down right now. I was like, okay. You remember those old credit card machines where you put the card in and you run it across? Well, they didn't have one of those. No, she pulls out a piece of paper and a crayon.
Sweet.
Puts it down, and she was about to rub it. I was like, whoa, stop. No. That's not PCI compliant. She didn't know what that meant. I was like, no. Here's the item. You can have this back. I'm taking my card, and I'm going back out. And she was really confused. But I don't want them to have a crayon rubbing of my credit card. Now, this is when you still had credit cards that had, stamped raised letters. I don't want them to have that. So, no. Thankfully, most credit cards nowadays, they don't have that, so you can't rub that. But it was crazy. But when I go into organizations, I might ask them questions that I want to know about them. There was one issue. We were at it was a hospital, and they were asking for some information about my daughter. And I didn't want to give up that information, And she got really confused because she asked this question probably 100 times a day, and everyone just gives it up. And I'm like, no, I'm not giving you this information. And she goes, but we need it. I was like, well, why do you need it? Well, we need it for HIPAA. Oh, no, you don't. I do a lot with HIPAA. I'm actually working on my HIPAA certifications right now. And it's like, no, that's not the way that works. And it's like, well, can I see your HIPAA policy, which every hospital has to have, and they have to provide to you if you ask for it? Do you have your HIPAA policy? I want to see it. I don't know. No one's ever asked me that. I was like, well, can you go ask a supervisor? So she left. She went back. Of course, my wife is all upset with me, saying, why are you giving her a hard time?
Right.
She knew. I mean, she knows, but... And she comes back. She's got this nice little glossy that they have. I mean, all hospitals are supposed to have this, and she handed it to me, and I'm going to... Well, come to find out, it was not for HIPAA. It was for collections. They wanted this information about my young daughter because if there's a collections issue, it's like, you're not coming after a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old daughter for collections. You're going to come after the parents, so you don't need that from her. She goes, well, I guess you're right. And it's like, but regardless, it's not HIPAA.
Right.
That turned me off of that organization because they did that. Mm-hmm. And that's, to me, that's business they lost because I'm not going back there. Their people don't know their own regulations. They don't know their own policies. That's a marketing problem.
Right.
That's a training problem. That's a policy problem, whatever. But it's a marketing problem because now I'm not going to use them ever again.
Yeah.
That's going to hurt people. Now, some places, very large organizations, they might get hit with a data breach. They might have this. They might have that. You might go to them anyway. Should you? Maybe. Maybe not.
Maybe you don't have a choice.
Maybe you don't have a choice. Absolutely. However, I think where you do have choices, if they do good security things, then that could lead to more business or lead to a reputational thing of where it's like, oh yeah, they are doing the right things. And honestly, here's the thing: what I see happening in the future, we have a lot of frameworks or a lot of compliances out there that are coming through saying you have to report these things publicly. And I think people are going to start taking note of that. It's like, well, that organization's had 10 breaches this year. That one's only had 2.
Right.
Well, I'm going to go with them, you know. Or more importantly, I'm going to lie. Mm-hmm. You know, they had 10 data breaches. I'm just going to lie about my information because they're clearly not protecting it. So everybody that has big data or they do data science on their data, who have to have good data to do that data science, when you start having breaches, and I know this because I teach people how to do this. They come to me and they want training on how to protect their identity, protect their private data. And one of those things is lie. If someone is not going to protect your data, don't give them your data.
Right.
So anyway, that's a marketing thing, and I think that's really important for people to understand.
Yeah. This is a fascinating conversation and really wide-ranging as we talk about security, cybersecurity, IT, and how to market ourselves and market to other people better. And so this is actually going to be a 2-part episode. So you've seen part 1, and tune in next time for part 2 as we continue the conversation. Thanks, Jonathan.
Absolutely.